We're waiting to hear from the President of the United States, just a minute away. Historian Jane Hampton Cook on why the thinking that Republicans are going to be at a disadvantage here might be a bit premature. Explain, Jane.
Well, you know, certainly the short-term expectations is that the Republicans will be blamed, but this is Obama's second term. During the 1995 shutdown, it was Clinton's first term, and he was up for re-election. So the stakes were much higher for the president back then. But it's Obama's legacy, and this will definitely play into the narrative that he doesn't necessarily work well with Congress.
But, you know, generally when polls come out, as weak as both sides' poll numbers are, in these events, the president comes out better, and as you've reminded me, because he's one guy against 435 in the House, 100 in the Senate. So the focus is on him, and he's trying to be, in his press statements and the like, the great, you know, pacifier here and calm and be cool about it. Does that help him?
Sure, that helps him. It helps him in that, you know, he does present that calmness and coolness under pressure. But, you know, the long-term history is not always the same as the short-term. And so this will feed into the narrative of what happens with Obamacare. That will depend on a lot of it. A lot of it, too, will depend on how long this lasts. Are we talking 2 or 3 days? Are we talking 21 days? And that, I think, will have a greater impact.
You mentioned something interesting, because the last one was 21 days in 95, 96, carried through the Christmas holiday. And that, the longer it went on, the more it was hurting Republicans. Does the longer this go on, if it happens, the same apply or no?
I believe it does, because especially if that affects the midterm elections. You know, in '96, President Clinton won re-election handily.
Right.
He beat Bob Dole, who was the Senate Majority Leader, who opposed the shutdown but went along with a lot of things in the process. So it really will depend on that election in 2014 that will make, I think, the historical result more clear.
Jane, are you in the camp that says, you know, Ted Cruz was on the floor of the Senate a little while ago, reminding folks, you know, we've offered everything here, but we wanted to remind people how bad, how awful this was. Did his critics say theatrics on the floor last week? He says it might have had the desired effect, just reminding people who might be switching around the television last week when I was in Washington, hey, what is this law about? What is this guy going about? And yeah, I'm nervous about it, and these exchanges, and where I stand in this, and how much it's going to cost me. And that longer term, it might have had the desired effect. In other words, these critics of the law reminding folks, yeah, this thing is coming down, and you're not going to like it.
Well, that's true, and the Republicans have already appealed to their base by the votes that they have taken. Senator Cruz has appealed to the people that are attracted to him and what he has to say by doing his 21 hours long speech on the floor of the Senate. So in some ways, they've already won that aspect of this whole process. They've put their opinions on the record. You
know, as a historian, Jane, I always think that the mainstream media has a very different view of who's stubborn. Like, if you're Republicans and you stubbornly insist on controlling spending, you're an obstructionist. If you're a Democrat and you stubbornly insist on blocking controlling spending, you are not. But that is what it is, I guess. But does that ever get old, or does that ever get recycled in history where people say, wait a minute, that might have been the view in the moment, but longer term, it's not reality?
That does happen in history. You look at it, because a historian looking back 20, 30, 40 years, 60 years, you don't have the same emotion that you do in the heat of the moment during the current times.
Very true.
When you're studying something, and so you can look at it more objectively.
Absolutely. Jane Hampton Cook, historian extraordinaire. We should point out in that 95, 96 debacle, as Jane pointed out, Republicans did get a lot of what they wanted. The welfare to work program that became very famous, and Bill Clinton took credit for it, but to be fair, he championed that along with you know, a Republican Congress. And we did restrain spending. So you could argue that longer term, it might have been a Pyrrhic victory, but a victory nonetheless for Republicans doesn't